The first time I realized how easily someone else's words could steal my peace, I was standing in a crowded marketplace. A man I barely knew shouted at me, accusing me of something I hadn't done. For a moment, I felt my chest tighten, my face burn, and a storm rising inside me. I wanted to shout back, to defend myself, to prove him wrong. But then, something strange happened. I remembered a simple line I had once heard. If you hand me a gift and I don't accept it, to whom does the gift belong? In that moment, I understood his anger was like that unwanted gift. I didn't need to take it. I simply breathed, and suddenly the noise around me felt distant. Have you ever been in a situation like that, where someone's behavior seemed designed to test your patience? It's in those moments that the real challenge of life appears, not in controlling others, but in controlling ourselves. Today, I want to share how timeless Buddhist lessons can help us remain calm around difficult people. There was a time when I thought the world would be easier if only other people behaved better. I remember working with someone who never missed a chance to criticize. No matter how carefully I did my work, he always found a fault, and his tone carried the weight of arrogance. At first, I tried to fight back with my own sharp words, but that only created more tension. Other times, I would stay silent, but inside, I was boiling with anger. The more I resisted him, the heavier the burden became. I carried his voice home, replaying his words in my head long after the day had ended. And I began to notice something strange. He was not the one making me suffer. I was. It wasn't just him either. On the streets, in families, even among friends, there are people who know exactly how to press the wrong buttons. They speak carelessly, they act without kindness, and they stir up storms in our hearts. I used to believe that if I could just avoid these people, I would finally be at peace. But life kept bringing me new ones, as if the universe wanted me to face the same lesson again and again. The real problem was not their behavior, but my inability to remain steady in front of it. Difficult people are everywhere, and they are like mirrors, reflecting back the weaknesses we try to hide. They test our patience, expose our anger, and reveal how little control we actually have over our own minds. Once, I heard a story about the Buddha that changed the way I looked at conflict forever. It is said that a man once approached him, filled with anger, and hurled insult after insult. Everyone around expected the Buddha to respond, but he remained calm, listening quietly until the man grew tired. When asked why he didn't reply, the Buddha smiled gently and said, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong?" In that simple question, there was a universe of wisdom. The Buddha was showing that insults, anger, and negativity are not things we have to carry. They only enter us if we open the door. For me, this was like holding a mirror to my own life. I realized that whenever someone was unkind to me, I had been rushing to open that door wide, inviting their anger into my mind, feeding it with my own reaction. But Buddhist teachings remind us that peace is always a choice. Anger is like a fire. If you add wood, it grows, but if you stop feeding it, it eventually dies out. The Buddha taught that difficult people are not enemies, but teachers, showing us where our patience ends, where our compassion wavers, where our ego still clings tightly. There is also the lesson of compassion. The Buddha often reminded his followers that those who hurt others are themselves in pain. Just as a person with a wounded hand may drop things carelessly, people with wounded hearts often throw words or actions that cut. To meet them with anger only deepens the cycle of suffering, but to meet them with calmness is to step out of that cycle. I began to see difficult people differently. Instead of asking, "Why are they treating me this way? What pain must they be carrying to act like this?" This shift did not excuse their behavior, but it freed me from being chained to it. The Buddha's perspective is not about escaping reality, but about facing it with clarity. He taught that true strength is not in overpowering others, but in mastering oneself. To stay calm in the storm of someone else's anger is not weakness, is the deepest form of courage. I once asked myself, what would it mean to truly live these lessons, not just hear them? Slowly, I began to practice in small, ordinary moments, and I discovered how timeless Buddhist teachings are when applied to daily life. The first lesson was mindfulness. One day, someone cut me off in traffic, and I felt the familiar rush of irritation rising inside me. In the past, I would have shouted or cursed under my breath. But instead, I simply noticed the feeling, the tightness in my chest, the heat in my face, the thought that screamed, "How dare he?" I didn't fight the feeling, but I didn't feed it either. Just noticing it created a space, like opening a window in a crowded room. That small pause was enough to keep me from being dragged into anger. Mindfulness, I realized, is like holding a lantern in the dark. Doesn't remove the shadows, but it lets you see clearly where you are stepping. The second lesson was compassion. There was a neighbor who often complained loudly about the smallest things. At first, I judged her harshly, but one evening, I overheard her speaking to someone about the loneliness she felt after her husband's passing. Suddenly, her sharp words made sense, not as attacks against me, but as cries from a wounded heart. I remembered the Buddha's teaching. Hatred is never ended by hatred, but only by love. Compassion doesn't mean letting others walk all over you, but it does mean looking beyond their harshness to the suffering beneath. When I began to respond to her with patience instead of defensiveness, I noticed her tone softening too. Compassion has the power to transform not only others, but also the heavy walls we build within ourselves. The third lesson was non-attachment. I used to believe that if someone insulted me, it meant something about my worth. Their words stuck like glue, replaying in my head again and again. But Buddhism teaches that clinging to praise or blame is like trying to hold water in your hands. It always slips away. One day, after receiving harsh criticism at work, I sat quietly and asked myself, is this criticism a reflection of who I truly am, or just one person's passing thought? I realized that just as I don't cling to every compliment, I don't have to cling to every insult either. Non-attachment gave me freedom, the freedom to remain steady, even when others tried to shake me. The fourth lesson was the power of the pause. Breathing may seem too simple, almost childish, yet it became my greatest tool. Once, in the middle of an argument, I caught myself about to explode. Instead, I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, and let it fill me like a calm wave washing over fire. In that single breath, I found a strength not to say something I would regret. The Buddha compared the mind to a pond. If stirred, the water becomes muddy, but if left still, it reflects the sky clearly. The pause is what allows the mud to settle. Even in the heat of conflict, just one conscious breath can make the difference between chaos and peace. As I practiced these lessons, mindfulness, compassion, non-attachment, and the power of pause, I began to see difficult people less as enemies and more as teachers. Each one gave me a chance to train my patience, to test my understanding, to strengthen my heart. And strangely enough, the more I practiced, the less power they had over me. Their words no longer clung, their anger no longer burned, and their presence no longer unsettled me. What once felt like a battlefield began to feel like a classroom where every encounter carried a hidden gift. These timeless practices are not about changing others. They are about transforming the way we meet them. And in that transformation, we discover the calm that no one can take away. Asterisk, not long ago, I faced a situation that tested everything I had been learning. At work, a colleague raised his voice at me during a meeting, accusing me of making a mistake that wasn't mine. For a moment, everyone's eyes were on me, waiting for a reaction. In the past, I would have snapped back, my pride demanding justice. But instead, I felt the anger rising and chose to pause. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch. Inside that pause, I remembered, I am not required to carry his anger. When I spoke, my voice was calm. I simply said, I understand. You're upset, but let's look at the details together. That small shift turned the room from confrontation to problem solving. Later, he even apologized. Since then, I've practiced the same steps whenever I meet a difficult person. First, I notice my reaction instead of acting on it. Second, I breathe deeply to create space between their action and my response. Third, I remind myself that their words come from their own struggles, not my worth. And finally, I choose a response that keeps my peace intact. It's not always easy. Sometimes I fail and slip back into old habits, but each attempt strengthens the habit of calmness. Difficult people haven't disappeared from my life, but the way I meet them has completely changed. What once felt like battles now feels like opportunities to practice the art of inner freedom. Looking back, I realize that the real challenge was never about changing others, was about transforming myself. Each difficult encounter became a mirror reflecting where I held tension, pride, or impatience. By practicing mindfulness, compassion, non-attachment, and the simple pause, I discovered a calm that no one could take from me.